Hey, how you doing? So, this is gonna be The Walking Dead Season 2, Episode 1. Now, if you haven't seen any of my posts on Twitter, Discord, YouTube, the community post, basically I've decided to not to pause the recaps, right? Because I want to the whole point of my channel is gameplay, is gaming, it's not recaps. So I just want to provide, and because of the amount of recaps that I will have to do, because I have to do the whole of season 1 of The Walking Dead and stuff like that, it's just so much, and I just rather just provide you guys with actual gameplay as soon as possible. So for the case of just making it make sense, I'm gonna do obviously season 2 episode 1, like the recap for season 2 episode 1, purely because obviously the actual gameplay starts on episode 2, and just to make it easier for people watching, at least I'll give episode 1. But the next episode, or the next video, is going to be an actual gameplay. So finally, obviously the recaps that I don't do now, I will probably do them at some point in the future, but for now they're on pause. If you guys really desperately want to see a recap of season 1 of The Walking Dead and 400 days and any other recap that I have to do that I won't do now, I will slowly start to churn them out for you, but for now they're on pause. So just let me know if you really desperately want them, and I'll do them for you. If not, I'll do them at some point in the future. Also, if you have never watched a gameplay of The Walking Dead Telltale, you don't know what the game is, this my channel is the first experience you've had of the game, and so you have no context of what happened in season 1 or 400 days or whatever, you can literally just go, there's so many people who have played this game, just go to any one of their channels and watch season 1, and then once you've finished watching season 1, you can come back to my channel for season 2, obviously. But yeah, so that's it, and we're going to start with season 2 episode 1. Okay, so this the start of episode 1 begins 8 months after the events of the last episode of season 1. Okay, and it's just Omid, Krista, and Clementine. So Omid, Krista, Clementine, just walking together. No one else, just them three, and they're just talking and having chats and stuff. And it is seen that Krista is pregnant. So they're just talking about the baby names and stuff like that. General, discussions and banter and stuff. They suddenly stumble upon a bathroom, like a public restroom, and so they decide to clean up and wash up. So Omid and Krista go to the male bathroom, and Clementine goes by herself to the female bathroom, or the women's bathroom. As Clementine enters, she checks each stall to make sure that there's no one there, and so she can relax and do things, peacefully. Deciding that she's safe in the bathroom, Clementine sets her gun and backpack down alongside the bathroom mirror and cleans her face of grime. At the beginning, she wanted to use the sink, obviously, but the sink doesn't work, so she decides to use the bottle of water that she has in her backpack to wash up instead. So, as she finishes to wash up, she accidentally knocks over the water bottle that she had placed on the counter right here, and it rolls under one of the stalls, and it ends up rolling under the furthest stall, so this one right here. So she goes obviously to retrieve it, but as she's retrieving it, she hears the restroom door opening. Discreetly looking in the mirror's reflection, she sees that it is neither Omid nor Krista, but an unknown woman. She immediately closes the stall door and hides, crouching on top of the toilet seat. The newcomer discovers Clementine's supplies left behind on the sink, including her gun. Right before she leaves, however, the toilet seat shifts underneath Clementine's weight, which causes her to gasp and give away her position. Now, by the way, this is the woman right here. I don't know the woman's name, and I don't think her name's ever mentioned. I think she's just known as the rando woman, like the unknown woman. So I couldn't really specifically search for her, so this is the best I could find with her in it. But yeah, this is the woman right here. And this is Clementine's bag and gun that she had placed on the counter or the sink or whatever. So the woman coldly points Clementine's own gun back at her, ordering her out and demanding that Clementine hand over any other supplies. After Clementine insists that she has nothing else, she demands that Clementine hand over her hat, which is crazy to ask or demand for her hat because um her hat, which is this that she's wearing right here. So this is Clementine's hat in a better view. But basically, um the hat has a lot of significance and sentimental value because it got given to Clementine before the outbreak by her dad. So she holds it very near and dear to her heart. So the fact that this woman, obviously the woman doesn't know the sentimental value, but the fact that this woman's asking or demanding Clementine to give, or like robbing Clementine by taking her hat as one of the things she takes, is very, you know, very not good because obviously it's a very cherished hat. Now, in my playthrough, I obviously resisted. I tried to resist, and so I basically refused to give her the hat. So now the woman starts mockingly searching through Clementine's backpack and insults Clementine's meager possessions. So Clementine has, drawings and like pictures and stuff, and so she just randomly starts insulting her about it and like teasing her. Don't know why, but okay. Like you're robbing me. Like why are you actually bullying me right now? Anyways, I'm also a child. Like Omid suddenly starts to quietly open the restroom door because obviously he must have heard shouting or something, or he must have like wanted to come check on Clementine or something. So he starts to cautiously open the door and he realizes what is going on as he sees Clementine held at gunpoint. He slowly creeps towards the stranger, but the restroom door swings closed loudly, causing the stranger to turn and reflexively shoot. Omid is hit in the chest, falling to the ground and dying within seconds as Clementine quietly cries. Krista quickly bursts into the restroom with her rifle at the sound of the gunshot, finding her husband dead on the bathroom floor. The stranger, almost as horrified as Clementine, immediately drops the gun and surrenders. She claims that she hadn't meant to shoot, but Krista dispassionately shoots her in the abdomen, killing her. As you can see in this picture, she is shot in the abdomen right here, which is very understandable and justifiable because she did just murder her husband, so. Krista kneels behind Omid's corpse, sobbing and cradling him in her arms. She then looks up and recognizes that the stranger had fired with Clementine's gun. Mourning, she gives Clementine a damning glance who remains where she is and briefly closes her eyes in shame. This is chapter 2, and this is 16 months later. Clementine and Krista are alone in rural North Carolina, sitting around a campfire amid rainfall before a storm. Despondent Krista goes to tend their fire, trying to keep it lit so they could cook a weasel. She pessimistically speaks about their situation, warning Clementine that the rain would turn to sleet and snow as they continued their journey north to Wellington, a place where they had heard rumors of a settlement of other survivors. Not allowing herself to get drawn into a discussion about her or Clementine's feelings, Krista coldly decides to go off to look for more firewood, leaving Clementine to maintain the campfire on her own. Searching through her backpack for her lighter, Clementine pulls out a torn photograph of Lee that she had secretly taken from the Everett Pharmacy drugstore in one of the first episodes of the first season. So Lee, for context, is the main protagonist in the first season, and he becomes because obviously the whole mission, I guess, or goal of the first season for Clementine was to find her parents because her parents had gone on a trip without her, and so she was left with the babysitter. So obviously, and then the outbreak happened, blah blah blah. So her whole mission, her whole goal is to find her parents. Lee finds her at the start in the first episode, and they, go on this journey together throughout the whole season to find her parents. So Lee basically starts becoming her, you know, father. It's like a sort of father figure with the absence of her father. And so they form a very, very, very close relationship and like bond and stuff. She also has a drawing of Kenny, Kaja, and Duck that she had made around the time that she had lost them. So is Kenny, Kaja, and Duck are a family that were part of their group in season one. Um, Kaja is Kenny's wife, and she died around I want to say like episode 3 maybe, by killing herself. She killed herself, and Duck also died at that same time, but he died because he got bitten by a walker. Um, and obviously, as retaliation, Kaja killed herself because she couldn't handle the death of her son. And so Kenny lost both his wife and his son at the same time. And at the end of the season one, Kenny is presumed dead because he basically sacrifices himself to save Krista. She finally finds her lighter that she was looking for and some magazine paper at the bottom of her backpack, and she uses it to make a kindle for a flame. Deciding that she had not fed the campfire enough to keep it lit, Clementine goes to find something else to use. Clementine then finds a nearby log and uses that as extra kindling for the fire. And she suddenly hears a noise that isn't coming that far from camp. So she goes to investigate, and she slowly realizes that it was a group of men that were shouting at someone. So this is their camp basically. So this is the fire. This is the log that she uses to feed the fire. They have a weasel, I think it was, cooking, stuff like that. Trying to stay hidden, Clementine approaches to find Krista being harassed and held at gunpoint by 3 scavengers. They demand to know where Krista's group is, not believing her claims that she is alone in the woods. Seeing that they are prepared to shoot her, Clementine grabs a rock and hurls it at the scavenger standing behind Krista. Her throw hits him in the head, stunning him. She immediately calls for Krista to run, drawing the attention of the other 2 men. Krista turns and runs by the stunned scavenger, but he recovers and shouts after Clementine, making her run back into the other direction. Clementine hears Krista crying out in pain, then hears her screams get interrupted by a gunshot, but she does not turn back as she dashes away. So, from this, you can kind of assume maybe that Krista might have been shot or something along those lines. Clementine retreats past her camp, going off into the darkness with the scavenger in pursuit. This is chapter 3. As the brunt of the rainstorm arrives, Clementine tries to evade the scavenger, but she ends up running into a walker, getting cornered by it. The scavenger knocks it down from behind and kills it with his boot as Clementine breaks off a branch to use to defend herself, which is this branch that she's holding right here. She dodges around his attempt to tackle her and pierces his shoulder with the branch, running away again. She slides to a halt before she can fall over a rock shelf into a river, allowing the scavenger to catch up to her and drag her away. Clementine yells for him to leave her alone as he picks her up to carry her away, but he refuses. Clementine bites deeply into his right thumb, getting him to release her so she could try to crawl away through a hollow log. He grabs her again and drags her back away, trying to pin her to the ground. Clementine sees a walker caught on a sharpened tree stump nearby and manages to kick him into his grip. But she herself is grabbed by a different walker on the other side of a 2-trunk tree. The scavenger escapes and pulls Clementine away hard enough for the walker's arm to fall off, but both of them fall down. A third walker stumbles towards them, but Clementine gets up and escapes before it can attack her, allowing it to crawl on top of the scavenger and begin to devour him. Clementine tries to run away, but several more walkers converge on the area and force her back. After throwing a rock at one of them, Clementine accidentally tumbles over the rock shelf, painfully rolling downhill into the river below. Swept away by the current, she surfaces and keeps herself afloat as she flows downriver towards a destination unknown. This is chapter 4. The following morning, Clementine awakens on a riverbank in a calmer section of the river, coughing out water. Alone, cold, pained, and with no means to get back upriver, Clementine walks away from the scene. She manages to lift herself up a broken platform to get off the riverbank, following a dirt path to find a trail leading through the woods. After initially calling out for Krista, Clementine decides to follow the trail. After several minutes of wandering through the forest, some rustling nearby startles her. Approaching the source of the noise, she discovers a dog with the name Sam on its collar. Though he is initially hostile towards her, he whines after a moment and leads her away. Barking at something, the dog scurries off through the brush, Clementine deciding to go after him. This is Chapter 5. Sam leads Clementine to a ravaged campsite with a wrecked vehicle and multiple destroyed tents. As the dog starts sniffing around the area, Clementine decides to try searching the area for supplies. Upon searching through a trash can, Clementine excitedly pulls out a sealed can of beans, showing it to Sam, who similarly barks excitedly back at her. When Clementine nears the edge of the campsite, near a former barbecue setup, Sam bolts in front of her and barks at a walker seated at the base of a tree, apparently the dog's former owner. Clementine notices that the walker has been tied up to the tree with a switchblade embedded in its bitten shoulder, indicating that someone had tried to cut out the infected limb before death. Clementine uses a heavy branch nearby to club the walker in the head until it dies, and takes the knife for herself, as she should. This is Chapter 6. With both a can of food and the means to open it, Clementine sits down on an overturned log in the campsite and gets to work on opening it. Using the switchblade, she manages to pry open a lid to the can, revealing edible beans still inside. Clementine enjoys her first few beans until Sam comes up to her, expecting to be fed. Obviously, I chose to feed the dog, because why would I not? So she scoops out a few, holds it out for him in her hand, but because he's so hungry, and starving and he needs food, he suddenly corrals the can from her with his teeth and eats its contents before Clementine hurriedly takes the can back. But this makes Sam angry because obviously he's so hungry that he's it's like survival of the fittest kind of thing, you know. So, because of this, Sam attacks Clementine, knocking her to the ground and pouncing for her throat. Clementine just barely defends herself against Sam, letting him bite deeply into her forearm as she tries to get him off her. Using the switchblade, Clementine hits him in the snout until he lets go, but he rears up for another pounce. Now, by the way, I want to say a trigger warning, or content warning, or whatever, for the next picture, because it is pretty disturbing and sad. Clementine manages to kick him away mid-lunge, knocking him over the overturned log out of view. Recoiling in terror, Clementine realizes that Sam is not trying to attack again. She stands up to find that she has accidentally kicked him into the remnants of a destroyed tent, leaving him mortally wounded with 2 stakes in his hide. So I decided to kill the dog because I wanted to spare him of the pain because I just didn't want it to suffer. I didn't want him to suffer. So Clementine kneels down in front of Sam and apologizes to him. She stabs him in the heart with the switchblade, ending his suffering. Trying to steel herself, Clementine stands up and walks away, leaving the campsite behind. Pained to the point of tears, Clementine spends several minutes hobbling through the forest with no sense of direction. She discovers a small rock formation in the woods and slumps down against it, ready to pass out. Barely a few seconds later, Clementine hears more snarling from nearby, lifting her head to see several walkers closing in on her. She forces herself to her feet and tries to limp away, but she is quickly tackled by the nearest walker. Clementine is nearly bitten, but the walker's head suddenly falls off, saving her. She realizes that she has been rescued by a young man with a machete and an older man with a crossbow, the former of whom lifts her into his arms and rushes her away. So, this is the man with the machete, and this is the man with the crossbow. After asking whether or not she is with the group, the younger man introduces himself as Luke and the older man as Pete. Luke initially offers to take her back to their own group to have a doctor look at her, but he notices her bloody arm for the first time and abruptly drops her, thinking that she had been bitten by a walker. Clementine defends that it was a dog bite amid Luke's panicking, but they are skeptical of her claim. Pete decides to look at her wound, though he is unable to determine the source of her bite on his own. Pete challenges Clementine to swear to him that it was a dog bite, and I chose to, swear that it was a dog bite because it was a dog bite, so what do you want to say? Pete decides that it's worth the risk to let their doctor decide what had bitten her, so they bring her to their group. Luke is reluctant to allow it, though. Pete and Luke then lead a sagging Clementine to a cabin, but she faints shortly before arrival. So this is chapter 7. A short time later, Clementine groggily wakes up on the ground outside of the cabin, caught in the middle of an argument between Pete and several others. The others express doubts over her claim of being bitten by a dog and mention the possibility that she was with another group, with one man holding a rifle directly over her, wanting to prevent her from turning. So I chose to speak up and try and defend myself, and that startles the man with the rifle into shooting at her, but it just barely misses as he hits the ground beside her. Now, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, the man with the rifle that shoots at Clementine and misses is this guy over here. This guy cowering in the corner, knowing what he did. So Luke is outside, by the way. It's only Pete. It's only Pete, and then this woman, and then this guy who accidentally shoots Clementine, and then this guy, and these two are in the cabin. So now Luke immediately rushes out of the cabin at the gunshot, coming to make sure that Clementine was all right. He berates Rebecca, who is this is Rebecca, and the shooter Nick, so Nick, for being so aggressive with her. But their group doctor Carlos, which is this guy, interrupts their argument when he arrives to inspect Clementine's wound. So Carlos then looks at her bite and determines that he doesn't think it's a walker bite. But Nick doesn't believe it. He's not satisfied with that. So he again presses the need to prevent Clementine from turning, leading Pete to suggest that they amputate her arm if it came to it. So then I chose to appeal to Nick because he was the main one that was adamant that I was bitten. So I just wanted to try and get him on my side and try and make him see yo, I'm not bitten, you know what I mean? But wasn't able to change his mind. So as Carlos continues to examine Clementine's arm, his teenage daughter Sarah, I would pronounce it Sarah, but I think in the show, or not in the show, in the game, it's pronounced Sarah, so I'm gonna say Sarah, peeks out um, the front door of the cabin to ask about Clementine, which leads Carlos to order her back inside. So this is Sarah, Carlos's daughter. Ultimately, Carlos is unable to determine whether her bite came from the jaws of a dog or a walker just by inspecting the wound, so he then states that their only option was to wait until morning to see if Clementine showed any symptoms that they would associate with a walker bite, and they decided to keep her locked in the shed outside the cabin. Luke laments locking Clementine up in her condition, and Alvin, this is Alvin right here, he tries to suggest that they had enough supplies to comfortably treat her wound before he is scolded into compliance by Rebecca. So Alvin and Rebecca are a couple. They're husband and wife, I'm pretty sure. Carlos tells Clementine that he would address her injury in the morning if she turned out to be honest, then leaves before she can object. Luke apologizes to her but agrees to go along with the doctor's decision. He and Nick then escort Clementine to their shed a short distance away, making her go inside before they lock the doors. As the others return to the cabin before another thunderstorm arrives, Clementine decides not to wait around. Looking around the shed for anything she can use to treat herself, she finds a roll of fishing line in a tackle box, deciding that it could be repurposed to stitch herself. Behind the tackle box is a rotted section of the shed covered up by a bolted-on board, giving her a possible way out of the shed. Using a hammer she clumsily recovered from a high shelf in the shed, Clementine is able to remove the wooden board, letting her kick through the rotted panel. This is chapter 8. Now outside of the shed, Clementine decides that she has to try to get what she needs to treat herself from the cabin. All the doors and windows on the ground floor are locked. Clementine can also hear Alvin and Rebecca having an argument in a bedroom if she goes up to a window and looks in, which I did, and I heard them having an argument. Rebecca is frustrated by her husband not agreeing with her about killing Clementine to keep themselves and their unborn child safe. Because Rebecca is pregnant. I don't know if you saw from the last picture, the last image, but she was pregnant. Clementine then finds a way into the crawl space below the cabin when she removes a plywood board in front of a hole. Underneath the cabin, she hears Carlos call for a meeting in the kitchen. She finds a locked trapdoor leading into the cabin and manages to pry it open, but at the cost of her switchblade when it breaks into the lock. Clementine climbs up through the door, finding herself inside the living room as the adults are all in the kitchen. Clementine then eavesdrops on part of their conversation, and basically they're talking about like just their concerns about Clementine and if she's lying and stuff like that, and that if like anyone might come looking for her if she's part of the group, stuff like that. So then she goes upstairs and she finds a roll of rags that she can use as bandages and a wristwatch that she can take for herself, which I did take. Um, then Clementine enters a random bedroom and it ends up being Sarah's bedroom, and Sarah is in the bedroom. So Clementine enters the bedroom and shuts the door behind her so the two of them can speak. Clementine tries to get Sarah to help her by like, kind of low-key manipulating her, you know what I mean? Just lying to her and pretending to be her friend. And during their conversation, she learns that Sarah is very sheltered, in the sense that Carlos keeps her in the cabin at all times, doesn't like allow her to go outside to do things by herself, and like he's very protective of her, and she's very sheltered because of this. Um, I decided to lead Sarah into believing that Clementine and her were best friends. So because of this, Sarah decides to help Clementine get the rest of her supplies, and she gives her a disinfectant solution. Then Clementine leaves the bedroom and she goes into the bathroom and she finds a needle which you can use to stitch her wound shut. But she hears Rebecca coming upstairs right as she is about to leave. So I chose to hide in the bathtub. Rebecca then enters the bathroom to wash her face, and expresses hopes to herself that her pregnancy would end well and that the baby was Alvin's before rejoining the others downstairs. So in this situation, we find out that the baby might not be Alvin's, which means that Rebecca cheated on Alvin, which is crazy. Now that Clementine has everything she needs, she leaves the cabin and returns to the shed. This is chapter 9. Back in the shed, Clementine basically, you know, does a bunch of things to stitch her wound shut and disinfect it and stuff like that. Sterilize it, that's the word. It is very painful. I would assume, like, makes sense. She then picks up the bandages to, wrap her wound up, but accidentally drops them. And before she can pick them up, a walker crawls through the hole in the shed and attacks her. Clementine fends it off using whatever she can grab in the shed, and she ends up picking up a rake and pushing it and using it to push the walker back. Then eventually the walker gets impaled by a drop anchor, which is this thing back here, allowing Clementine to grab a hammer and repeatedly clobber it in the head until it dies. At that moment, Luke opens the shed doors as the other survivors rush over, drawn by her screams, and they notice that she had treated her own wound, making Rebecca annoyed that she had stolen from them. Carlos now says that he would bring Clementine into the cabin finally and look at the wound properly. As they're about to go into the cabin, Luke guiltily offers her food, but Clementine just ignores him and continues to go meet Carlos inside the cabin. This is chapter 10. Carlos finally determines that Clementine had not been bitten by a walker when she does not show any symptoms of infection. In a moment alone after Luke and Nick leave, Carlos reveals his daughter's ignorance of the world around them and asks Clementine to stay away from her so that she does not impact Sarah, as she would cease to function if she knew the truth. So, as I said, he's like very protective of her. Then Carlos leaves, and Luke comes in with some food for Clementine. So he tries to make small talk with her while she eats, um, but Loki kind of fails because Clementine's kind of just like, what I made Clementine very like passive aggressive and just like non-respondent because I was just kind of pissed at Luke. I was pissed at everyone in the group because like, why are you not believing me? Like, I get it, but also I'm a child. Do you get what I mean? Anyways, and then Nick comes back to the kitchen and he starts apologizing to Clementine for how he had treated her earlier. And while they're having this conversation, Nick starts recounting with Luke the story of how he'd lost his mother to a walker bite. And then, like, after this conversation, Nick leaves the kitchen. And then Luke, so now it's just Clementine and Luke. So they're sitting at the table there. So Luke suddenly offers Clementine a chance to stay with them at the cabin for a little while, even if the others might not have been on board with it. Rebecca. Um, and he tries to get Clementine to share with him how she had survived for so long after the outbreak. Um, and Clementine just like tells him a little bit about the story, of how she was in like a group and like with Lee and stuff like that. So then eventually like stuff happens, then Luke leaves, and then Rebecca comes into the kitchen. So it's only Rebecca and Clementine. Clementine is still eating peacefully. And Rebecca just starts unloading on her and starts being so rude and just basically saying to her that she doesn't like her, basically. Um, and then Clementine's like, okay, cool, bye. And then that's it. Sorry that the picture's a slight bit blurry. I don't know why it's like that, but hopefully is still fine. As in, like, you can still see them. It's all good. Um, but yeah, so basically the night before, Pete invited Clementine to join him and Nick on a fishing trip. So in the morning, Pete, Clementine, and Nick all go on this fishing trip. So then the conversation so basically then Pete starts asking Clementine, if she'd been taught how to shoot, and she says yes, she'd been taught by Lee in season one. Obviously she doesn't say season one, but you know what I mean. And then Pete starts talking about how he had taken Nick hunting many years before the outbreak. And they just, went down memory lane and basically said that Nick was very scared or afraid, or yeah, very scared or afraid to shoot a deer. So like basically alluding to the fact that Nick wasn't like Nick and guns just didn't go together. Oh, and by the way, Nick and Pete's relationship is Pete is Nick's uncle, so Nick's mother's brother. So they eventually arrive at the stream, and they're shocked to find a bunch of corpses just littered around, just scattered. Um, and they discover that all of them were apparently shot to death. And Nick speculates that it may have been someone named Carver. And then when Clementine asks who Carver is, um, neither Pete or Nick decide to elaborate. So like Clementine's just left not knowing who this Carver dude is. So they then all three of them just decide to like go around and explore and like check on the bodies and kind of try and piece together what might have happened. So Pete Pete searches on one side of the riverbank, Nick on the other, and then Clementine searches in kind of like the middle. Like there's like a little middle island or whatever you want to call it, a little piece of land. And surprisingly enough, next to the body that she finds on the central bank, she finds her backpack next to the corpse, which means that man and potentially the other bodies scattered around were part of the group, the part of the scavengers that attacked her and Krista at the camp. Because obviously she had to abandon her backpack at the campsite when she had to run away. So they probably, or not probably, they definitely looted the campsite afterwards and found her backpack and stuff, and yada yada yada. The body then starts coughing, which reveals that the man is still alive, but he's barely alive. And Clementine does recognize him as one of the scavengers who had attacked Krista, and she demands that he tell her what had happened to her friend, but he just mumbles out of pleas for the water bottle in her backpack. So I chose to give him water because my thought behind it was that he would be able to tell me like what happened to Krista and stuff like that. And so Clementine gives him the water, but basically what ended up happening was that she just gave him the water and then just like left. And so I was just like, oh, the whole reason why I gave him the water was that he could tell me more. And Clementine didn't even do that. She just left. And I was like, okay, cool. Pete suddenly like shouts in pain nearby, and Clementine looks up and sees him trying to shoot a walker at his feet and manages to kill it, obviously. Obviously Nick calls out and asks if everything's okay, and obviously Pete says yeah, everything's fine. But Clementine spots that his ankle, Pete's ankle, is like very bloody, and she manages to see a bite mark on his ankle, which obviously determines that he was bitten by the walker that he was attacked by. Suddenly, more walkers appear and on either side of the bank, and so both Nick and Pete start getting attacked by these walkers. Pete, however, runs out of ammo, and so all he can do is back away from the walker. And Nick is starting to get surrounded by the walkers. And I decided to help Nick. So I based this decision on the fact that Pete was bitten, so he was gonna die regardless. So I was like, I'd rather help Nick because Pete's gonna die regardless. Do you know what I mean? And Pete continues to get attacked, and they like jump on him, or not jump on him, but they like go onto him and stuff like that. Nick try like as soon as Clementine and Nick have you know um dealt with the walkers attacking Nick, Nick turns around to try and help his uncle, but discovers that he's run out of ammo as well, and so he can't help him, or at least can't help him in time. And obviously, Pete dies because he gets eaten by the walkers. And obviously, Nick is distraught by this and ends up blaming Clementine for Pete's death because he basically starts saying like, "Why did you help me? You should have helped him." Blah 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 blah. As this is happening, a bunch of other walkers start coming. Like they never finish. Like there's so many, and basically the episode ends with Nick and Clementine in danger, just getting surrounded by walkers, and that's the end of the episode. The end. Fin. Fine. Fini. I don't know any other words. I don't know any other like I don't know how to say the end in any other languages. Yeah, that was it. So this is gonna be the last recap, as I said, for a while, which is great because I'm excited to post a bunch of actual gameplays on my channel. Like that's literally the whole point of my channel, and it's just been a bunch of recaps. So well, it's only been 2, but you know what I mean. See you next video. Yeah. Out south, everybody out south. You allow. You yeah, ooh, ah, but I do I. But I had a better side, I yo gotta what it ooh sa what ooh sa you ja but sa what ha Re ba ba da da hu ah 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 ya bidi da ha ah ha